Okay. Yeah. Okay.
That's first. Well, all right. Welcome back to another bonus episode of the Cousin Cecil Show, where I am back again with another creator of a comic book, and this one is a pretty cool one because right now you can go to Kickstarter.com and help back it. He is here to obviously more, promote. What is it? Damsel from Distress. Please give it up for Andrew Clemson, the author. How are you doing today?
Hi. Nice. I'm doing good. All things considered. Thanks for having me on.
How well? Yeah, and then you're a really big time zone away. Is there any big news to know about that's coming up? I'm just kidding. That's
no. I don't. I think it's best you find out for yourself. I don't want to depress anyone.
That's no, but yeah. You're here, obviously, just more to do a quick thing, and then we'll get you to actually explain more about your background.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you've worked with Scout Comics. It's been kind of more of a heavier hand of what your published books are.
Yeah.
With D.I.S.T.R.E.S S and then and all that stuff. But you are, like I just said, you're on a Kickstarter trying to promote a new book. But yeah, go ahead and give a little background for yourself and all that.
Okay. Yeah. So like you said, my first book I put out was called D.I.S.T.R.E.S, and that was a Kickstarter initially, but then it got picked up by Scout Comics, and it came out. We did 6 issues in a trade. That's a kind of it's exactly as you would imagine it. It's a big sort of space arsehole flying around, getting in trouble and annoying people. It's a sort of action comedy throwback type series. So we did that one. Then I put out a superhero sort of vigilante noir revenge story called D.I.S.T.R.E.S on Kickstarter as well. That's through a company called Mad Robot Comics in the UK. And that's kind of a world where all the superheroes have disappeared, and the character who definitely for trademark reasons is not Batman. I have to underline that. So this character who might seem a lot like Batman, but he's not Batman. He's long dead, but suddenly returns from the grave to exact his revenge on the people that wronged him. So that one we're putting out on Kickstarter. That should be. We just did issues 2 and 3, so issues 4 and 5 should come up before the end of the year for the rest of the trade. But yeah, the one that's currently live is called Damsel from D.I.S.T.R.E.S, which is kind of a mashup of Dungeons and Dragons and Zelda, mixed up with a bit of like James Bond, Man from U.N.C.L.E., which is where the name comes from.
Yes.
Charlie's Angels, things like that. And it's kind of, like a young sort of hotshot agent who works for this sort of fantasy agency, goes on a mission, but while on the mission discovers that, there's more to her family's history than she thought. So she has to sort of dig out those skeletons and figure out what's been going on.
Yeah, I was going to say for audio listeners, it's going to be hard to understand. Yeah, distress, just like Uncle, the man from U.N.C.L.E., it all abbreviates into something else. But no, I got to read the first issue of Damsel, and I want to say it's really good. I can also definitely tell your writing style from like even from Star Bastard to Damsel, where the idea of like there might be bad villains, but they have like that humorous jokiness to them. Yes, and I thought that
I like to not take anyone seriously. Everyone is equally ridiculous in the books I do.
Besides that Bête Noire, because that Bête Noire, I only read the first issue too, and that one was definitely very more on the idea of very mystery wise for me as a reader. I'm like, whoa! And the next how the first book ends, I'm like,
there's a bit of a bait and switch in the first issue. It's a twist halfway and a twist at the end, and it's my attempt at a more serious book. Obviously, it's one of these superhero noir things, but even that I can't help myself. There's still jokes. There's still a giant robot who can only say death to humans. There's always a little bit of dry humor in it. It's just I can't help myself.
No, and I like it. No, I'm more. But back to the damsel in distress. I do dig it. I do like also it's like you said, it's kind of like a fresh idea of like giving medieval times a agency of like using the magicalness of like Dungeons and Dragons, but also I really like it sounds dumb, but I actually like her boss, the frog.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things. Like I say, like it's important to have a story and things like that, and there is an overarching story. You know, there's a payoff at the end of the volume and onwards from there. But you know, why not have a bit of fun? If it's James Bond, yeah, your boss has got to be an old guy, you know, or an old lady that's going to be in charge. But in this, yeah, we get to have the head of the agency be like an old toad, and we get to have, you know, the most feared, you know, agency enforcer is a tiny little bluebird called Bone Crusher. Like it's you've got to lean into all
Yeah.
the dumb stuff that happens in these things and just take advantage of it, and that's what makes it fun, I think.
Yes. And I also was curious then, how'd you get into comics? Like, what was your background for that part? Like, what got you into, like, you know what? I mean, were you obviously a comic book reader through your whole life and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff? What is it?
Yeah. So I'm wrong side of 40 now. So I came into comics, you know, late 80s, early 90s, that sort of thing. So the first book I picked up, I was visiting a friend's house and he had a copy of Spider-Man, and it was the Craven's Last Hunt storyline of Spider-Man. It's the one where Craven's like, you know, there's the lightning and Craven's holding Spider-Man's suit and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, for like a, you know, 7, 8 year old kid, that's a dark first book to pick up. But something about that struck me, and I carried on and I got into Spider-Man stuff. And, you know, then there was that big X-Men relaunch in the 90s, and I had like that was my first like pull list situation. I had X-Men and Uncanny X-Men, and I had X Factor and X Force and everything, and I was obsessed with X-Men. So I read pretty much. I mean, I have to say, not exclusively Marvel, but I've never been, you know, obsessively reading anything from DC. I've read the classics, obviously, and things like that, but I was much more into Marvel growing up. Um, and I think most people, you sort of drop it when you get a bit older. You know, you finish school, you go to university, things like that. But luckily for me, I was at art school, and there was a comic shop next door. So I managed to get back in. It was around the time when, like, just before The Walking Dead came out, there was this big sort of indie boom. You know, I was picking up stupid books like Kirkman did one before Walking Dead called Battle Pope,
Okay.
which was absolutely ridiculous. But I just, you know, I've always liked sort of dumb books like that. So I got back into it around then. And then, you know, as an avid reader until 2014, 2015, a friend of mine from school passed away. And I thought, you know, if I get hit by a truck tomorrow, what did I want to do when we were at school? And one of those things was do comics. I very nearly, when I was 18, I almost went to a school in Georgia called the Savannah College of Art and Design, SCAD, because it was the only school I could find worldwide that did a degree in comic books. So, you know, I fell out of that. I went into animation and filmmaking and things like that. But, you know, I had this real sort of revelation. Thought I just want to do one. I wanted to get it out, and that sort of became Star-Bastard by, you know, a bit of a roundabout way. I started, as most people do, doing this big superhero epic, thinking, you know, are you going to be the next Frank Miller? Are you going to be the next Alan Moore? And this is going to be, they're talking about this comic you're going to do as your first attempt. You know, they're going to be talking about it in 50 years as the next big thing. And, you know, I started doing that, and I was talking to artists and putting it together. And I just got so tired of trying to do twists in issue 2 that were going to pay off in issue 300, you know, which is never going to happen for an indie creator. So, I did this little jokey idea. It was called The Ballad of the Star Bastard at the time. And it was just a paragraph, you know, from, I used to like Lobo and, you know, TV shows like Red Dwarf and Battlestar and all this kind of stuff. And I just did this jokey thing. And I sort of Facebook messaged it to the artist I was chatting to. And they said, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do that. Forget the other thing. So it was sort of roundabout way, fell backwards into this thing that then did really well. And, you know, I managed to put my first book out there, and, you know, just the first book I put out got picked up by a publisher. It got picked up by Scout. And I just, you know, I still think how odd it is that the jokey one I was going to just do as a sort of, you know, play a prank on the artist I was talking to. That's the one that picked up, and it sort of pushed me a little bit further along than I would have done otherwise. So we did come back to that epic. That's Bête Noire. That's what I was writing. But luckily, people I met since, I met a chap called Matt, who's an artist, a writer in the UK, and a good friend now. And he agreed to edit it. And, you know, we took out all the stuff which was over pretentious and grandiose, and we trimmed it down to the core ideas, and it became Bête Noire, which is now, ongoing. We're putting that out. So that's kind of, that's a long way of just explaining how I got to where I am now.
No, you basically nailed on the head. The idea of it's really cool to hear. Like even like the idea of like not like that, but like just like screw it. I'm gonna just put myself out there with a trouble thing. That's really cool. And also that gets me into you're definitely my first person I'm talking to that is more heavy on the Kickstarter side.
Oh yeah.
So I'm more curious, like, because of following you and then now following more and more each week, I'm following more people, and then is the Kickstarter like becoming like the next like local comic shop for some of these indie creators?
Yeah, I mean, look, Kickstarter is, I think if you looked at, forget Marvel and DC for the time being and Dark Horse and people like that, but if you look at the independent comics in Image, Vault, Scout, people like that, I don't think you'd have any of the books that you pick up from those publishers without a platform like Kickstarter, because comics are expensive to make, they're time consuming, you need a way to sell them. Now we've got no conventions and things like that. So, Kickstarter, you're either finding these great comics that are put onto Kickstarter and you're able to buy them first, at least on Kickstarter, or the creators which are putting out books at Image or Boom or Vault or places like this. They're people who have made a name for themselves through Kickstarter.
Yes.
So without it, I don't think you'd have anywhere near the number of amazing books that we have, even if you count the ones which are just going straight to comic book stores.
Yeah.
So the amazing thing about Kickstarter is, I'm funding a book at the minute, and you get notifications saying, "Bing, so and so has backed your book. Bing, so and so has backed your book," and you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I read their comic. I know their thing." Like there's this community of people who are chipping in to help each other get their books out. And like you say, it's in the terms of like looking at like a comic store, yeah, because if you see one creator recommending a project on Kickstarter, that's no different to bumping into the owner of the store and saying, "I know you like this. Have you checked out this one?"
Okay.
So I think it's an invaluable place at the minute, and without it, we would be screwed.
Good words. I was more because I was curious of. I'm used to Kickstarter in the terms of like video games. So So the idea of, I like to know if you do a Kickstarter with comic books, like if I wanted to, back some random ones, is there a difference between like a comic book style thing than a video game one, that in the sense of like, is there more of a guarantee of at least you'll get at least the PDF file? You know what I'm saying?
I think then you got to remember with comics, like I've never backed. Oh no, I tell you a lie. I have backed a computer game one. I backed Joe Madureira, the Battle Chasers game he did a few years ago. I backed that one. But generally speaking, my Kickstarter experience has been all comic books because that's what I like to do. So I know that board games are very popular on Kickstarter, and they're a bit of a contentious subject because I think there's been a few more high profile. The thing never turns up, or it never gets done, or the money gets used, and all this kind of stuff. The good thing about comics is, even though it's a lot of money to produce a comic, in the grand scheme of things, it's not. It costs anywhere from $2 to $5 to $10 to draw the thing and ship it out. Onwards and upwards depending on your numbers, but with games, you're talking so much more money. Yes. So there's, if that person. So I think you're. What's that?
We lost you for a quick second of that.
It says your internet connection is unstable. Yeah. There we go. This seems a bit. What was I saying? I just think because you have to be so hot on your numbers on Kickstarter that when you're talking about a video game project that maybe has to raise $100,000, $200,000 compared to a $5,000 comic, you make a tiny error on a comic, it's not going to push you out too much. Maybe you're $100 out of pocket or something, but the same mistake on a video game is tens of thousands, and they could maybe just decide it's not worth it at the end of the day. So like I say, I haven't got a huge amount of experience on video games. I've backed one, but I think with comics you're generally safe, especially when it's indie creators. the ones I've seen that have gone wrong tend to be big name people. People who have made their name in comics already and they've come back to do something on Kickstarter. But again, usually that's because they're not managing it. They've got someone else managing it for them, and they're a bit, not necessarily. There's a couple of steps of separation between them and the project. They maybe don't know what's going on. So
that helps me also, so that I can speak for that down the road. Because I was wondering, because like you just said, I was more so I can at least tell people, if you ever thought about backing a comic book on Kickstarter, there's a almost a 90% chance you are going to get something from that product of backing, which is better than some of those, not saying all of them, but of course, yes, like you nailed it on the head. Some of those horror stories of the video game ones, since obviously that goes into paying people, vast amount of people doing like salary wages off of Kickstarter's promise or something, or even like a board game that could be happening, but also maybe, the copyright thing could happen, all that stuff.
Yeah, there's all sorts of things that can happen. And remember, you've got, with a comic, like you say, you can get the thing done, and at least as a PDF. Even if they've completely ballsed up, the first thing they get wrong is the shipping. So, even if they decide, oh, we really can't do it, really sorry, but here's your PDF. That's an option there. And you're also dealing with lower numbers generally, aren't you? You can back a comic for $5 or $10 as opposed to a game, which I imagine is sort of $50 or $60 a pop at least.
Right.
So it's a lower gamble. But I'd say the good thing about Kickstarter is you can vet people. It says on their profile, it says how many things they've backed. It says how many things they've created. You can look at the old projects. The first thing you can do is just check out their last project. And if there's people commenting, where are my books? Maybe don't back that one. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So there is a level of transparency there, that you can go into if you're worried.
No, because it also helps me now to have a really bad itch and go on Kickstarter now looking for comics now too. Thank you.
Okay, good.
But my curious also is, I think I'm more asking this for a teaser for some of the recordings we're doing down the road. Mm-hmm. What is your process of, like, how do you approach a script for a comic? Like how much does it go on to the writer of, like, because that's one of my things I'm going to have set up for a recording is having somebody to come, like, kind of explain the writing process, but like of how much do you have to worry about when you're trying to write a script of, like, do you have to worry about every single square, or is it like something like a bounce ideas off with your team and all?
Okay. Yeah. So the way I approach things is slightly different to how it was when I did my first, it evolves as you do more projects. So the first thing I did, I think, like most people, it's your first thing. You're convinced it's the greatest thing ever, and you're the next, you're the great white hope of comics, and you're gonna come in and change the game. And you're, maybe a bit stricter on, no, this panel has to look like this, and I want this to be here, and I want this to be here. No, wavering from the plan. But as I've gone on, I've realized that other people know this stuff better than I do. Like, an artist understands visuals better than a writer does.
Right.
So what I tend to do is get out of their way. My scripts, traditionally comic scripts, will sit anywhere on a spectrum from the Marvel method, which is the way Stan Lee would do it, which he would just say, on page 1, I want this to happen. And on page 2, this will happen. Or sometimes it's just, in this book, I want this to happen. And then the artist is responsible for going in, plotting out all this stuff. And then the writer just goes back in and does a dialogue pass. But that's one extreme. And the other extreme is Alan Moore, where, 24-page book, he does a 300-page doctorate essay on, whatever. There's just description after description after description of what color the teacups should be.
Oh, wow.
So the way I tend to work is, sort of closer to the left and the right, I guess, in that scenario. But I keep everything to one page. I have a panel breakdown. I have a description of what needs to be in panels, and I have the dialogue. Sometimes I leave the panels descriptions empty. Sometimes the stuff I'm working on is predominantly comics. Is comedy comics, and that is obviously hinges on the pacing and the timing and page turns and deliveries and stuff like that. So I focus on the dialogue and sometimes leave the descriptions out and just let the artist decide what needs to go in there, how people should be acting and things like that. And I've also found that sometimes I'll put these things in and the artist will think, no, that's not going to work. I'll change it. And inevitably it's better than what I planned. You're working with people that know what they're doing, hopefully. So I have gone from being very controlling on the very first thing I did to now enjoying just letting other people surprise me with what they do. And the more input people have, the more enjoyable they find it, right? It's
Right.
like any job. If you're just told this is what you do, it's a laborious task. But if you're able to be creative with things, you're able to decide what you want to do, you're going to put better work into it. So I think you end up with a much better product if you just give people what they need, but also give them the room and the leeway to change things as they might need to.
No, that's good to know. Because it just makes me curious. Because obviously, not I have no chance of doing. No, I just was wondering that because like sometimes like when I ever had a thought, I'm like, you know what, I like to write that down, but I don't even know how to approach it if I wanted to ever think
Right.
about doing that of like even like a page, my own little square panel page of
Yeah.
like stuff. No, that's really cool to hear.
Well, the interesting thing is if you have an idea, I find some people say write it down, and quite often I will write it down if I think, oh my god, I'm going to forget this. It's amazing. But the crazy thing is that the good ideas are usually the ones that you don't write down, but they still keep coming back. If you get what I mean, like if you have a thought, you're driving in the car or in the shower, and you have this thought, and then you forget about it. Chances are it wasn't a great idea. But if you're thinking about it, and then the next day it hits you again, and then the next day it hits you again, that's a good sign that it's something that you should come back to and focus on. Because you can't get it out of your head, and the odds are someone else won't be able to either. So I've moved to just not writing things down now, and I'll only come down and actually start it if it's something that keeps coming back to me.
Well, teaser for me. No, this thought, this image or this idea that I have has been in my mind for a couple times. So that's even good to know I'm on the right track for my next conversation.
Keep expanding on it and keep going, and eventually you'll have it done before you even have to start writing.
But it also does show even how you just described your process. It does show like how you've done growth because anybody goes checks out D.I.S.T.R.E.S, it definitely has a definitely more. I don't even want to say like that. It's a very dialogue heavy because it's obviously spoiler for the first page. He's in a star fight, so obviously there's a lot more conversation. Oh no, what we're gonna do, blah blah blah. Compared to the Bet Noir, which there's a good chunk that is maybe 1 3-word sentence and then a really good descriptive just illustrations to get them into like the warehouse or something idea. You're just it does show your growth in the idea of how you said it's about letting loose and it becomes a team effort.
Yeah, I mean, again, the key thing there is the pacing. Like it's Starbastard is it's Guardians of the Galaxy. It's an R-rated Guardians of the Galaxy basically, and those things are fun. They've got energy. You've got to keep people on their toes. Whereas Bet Noir is like it sounds as a noir story. It's monologues and it's brooding and it's again, it's not Batman, but it's what Batman might act like. But it's it's a different style, and that keeps things interesting for me. I did a space thing, I do a superhero thing, I'm doing a fantasy thing, and the next thing I'm working on is like an occult mystery thriller. So it helps to sort of give yourself different genres and environments to work in. But it helps you stretch your feet and sort of learn the art of writing by doing different things.
Do you do any what is it? I guess I'm assuming comics is not your probably. Do you have a day job? Because I've had a conversation.
Yeah.
What is your day job?
Yeah, so comics is a difficult thing to do full time. I mean, I'd love to just have a house in the country and just sit there typing away all the time. But I work in TV, and I do used to call it TV commercials and corporate film, things like that. But it's predominantly online content now. But I'm a cameraman, a DP, so I shoot web content for a bunch of people. That's the day job. But the good thing about being freelance doing that is it gives you a lot of free time, so you can focus on other things like writing.
No, I was just curious because I wish the best for all the indie writers and creators I've talked to about that they can get out of the quote unquote get out of the day job and come just a
Yeah.
heavy person. Maybe flip it. Maybe you want to be a part-time DP instead of a full-time one. You know what I'm
I
saying?
would love to. I'd love to give it up and just write.
But no, I just was curious. And then what's another thing about this? So your Kickstarter with Damsel in Distress from Distress, excuse me.
Yeah.
It says 1 through 3, but what is the? I guess what are some stretch goals in the sense of is it just the first arc can be through 1 through 3, or is we're going to get 4 and 5?
No. So we did issue 1, and this campaign's for 2 and 3, but it helps get you backers if you are clear that you can get 1 to 3. No one wants to miss 1 and just get 2 and 3 right. So we changed the name to Damsel 1 to 3. So it's a reissue of 1 to complement the next 2 issues. The series as it stands, volume 1 will be 5 issues. So the reason we're doing 2 at a time is it's kind of a first world problem to have, but we have a lot of complaints on this and the other book that if I back this book, how long am I going to have to wait for issue 2, and then how long am I going to have to wait for issue 3? And if I back all those things plus shipping, I'm looking at like $150 for a trade paperback or something. Can I just wait for the whole thing? But that will unfortunately kill you, like in Kickstarter or in Diamond direct market sales. People that trade wait, and I'm one of them. I wait for trades purely because I read digital because of where I am. It's difficult to get stuff, but you need those single issue sales to keep it going until you get to the trade. So what we figured was by doing 2 issues at a time between these 2 books, we could squeeze in 1 more campaign a year. Because obviously you can only do so many Kickstarters a year once you factor in the pre-production and the campaign itself and the fulfillment. It generally takes about 3 months per campaign if you're lucky. So we're doing issues 2 and 3 on this one. Then we'll go back to Bet-Noir and do issues because we did 2 and 3 for that last in March. So we'll go back and do issues 4 and 5 of Bet-Noir, wrap that one up for the first volume. Come back to this one, do 4 and 5, wrap that one up for the first volume, and then see where we are from there, see where we want to focus.
Nice. And then that's good to hear. And then what is it? I was gonna say was no, and then I guess we'll even leave it like that. Also the idea of if you had the keys to any IP, what would be your your arc? What 5 comic book arc would you run of what character don't have, you know what I mean?
I don't know. Like, honestly speaking, I think if someone came to you and said, you can do anything. Like, if Marvel came to you, everyone's got their favorite. Like, I'm from the UK. There's a character called Captain Britain at Marvel, which now is Psylocke has sort of taken over and done it. And Brian's, I think, another character now. I can't remember what they called him, but that was my favorite growing up. Like I've got them all CGC slabs on my shelf. I've got statues and action figures and all that kind of stuff. That's the one character that I love to death. And Excalibur, that whole Marvel UK experience. We actually had like Marvel UK. It was a separate publisher, and they had their own characters. Yeah, so we had Death's Head 2. There was, Motormouth and Overkill and Knights of Pendragon. It was a very English line. I'd love to do things with those, or with Pete Wisdom, who's one of my absolute favorites from Excalibur. But I think the key when it comes to writers being asked, who do you want to write? I think it makes more sense to just ask the publisher, who does no one else want? Like, what is something that is not being used? Don't me saying, oh, I want to write Batman. I'm just going to be another Batman writer in a sea of Batman writers. So I would just love to take a character that has just got no chance, like Jack of Hearts or Quasar, or one of these old characters that doesn't get used, and just have a go and see what you can do with them, because that's really the only sort of blank slate you're going to get in the bigger publisher market is something they're not worried about. Like you look at all the great stuff. Guardians of the Galaxy was, I think, even the franchise was C or D list, let alone the characters they used. But that Annihilation reboot they did, where they brought in Star-Lord and Groot and Drax and Gamora, that was where that came from, and that was just who are the characters we don't care about.
Yeah,
it's like a Suicide Squad mentality, right? And look at how well Harley Quinn has done off the back of Suicide Squad, or those sort of characters. So I think I'd just love to have an IP that no one has heard of, rather than one. Give me Brave Star, or give me Ulysses 31, or something like that, like an old 80s cartoon. That would be great.
No, you nailed it on the head. That's what I exactly want to hear. Like the idea of that is definitely the very writers thing I've heard. I've had also one person, he said he didn't want to touch anything from the big two just because that's not his style. I'm like, wow. But also, hey, that's how he goes, and he also likes doing original content, which sounds like all creators like to do original content.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, like that's the dream, right? You get to do a Spider-Man book or an X-Men book or something like that. But I think as someone, you're trying to make a name for yourself, do something different that people haven't seen before, and work your way up to those things, because otherwise you're just going to get compared to the greats that have come before you. Like, I'm not as good at this point in my career. I'm not as good as the worst Spider-Man writer out there. So let the people better than me deal with that, and I'll take something cool, something that people haven't heard of, and just have a play.
There you go. All right, and like your Kickstarter, after this, hopefully you'll send me the link so I can have it in, for I can put in the description of the show.
Yeah, of course.
And then you how long is the Kickstarter open for?
So we've been running. We're going basically from the 5th till the 5th. So I think it ends on the 5th or the 6th of June. We got about 18 or 19 days running as of now, as of the 17th, 18 or 19 days to go. And we funded on day one. So we're into stretch goals. We just unlocked the £10,000 stretch goal, which I think it's like 15 grand or something in dollars. Like that added an extra digital story to the PDF. So we're going to add a 4-page digital only story with the Bone Crusher, the Bluebird.
There you go.
So that should be fun. That'll be a nice little extra thing. And we already unlocked a bunch of pin-up prints. We always like to chuck in, little mini prints that can fit in the bag and board. So we unlocked another cosplay print, and we unlocked an action figure, like a faux action figure packaging print, which looks quite cool. And the next goal is at £12,500, which I don't know what that is in dollars, but we need to get to that one, and then I can announce something really cool.
There you go. Congratulations on even just, we're in stretch goals. That's even great. And then also so that people know this, you'll have 15 days because this comes out on Wednesday.
Okay, so you got about 2 weeks.
Yep, you got 2 weeks, and it sounds like you can if you want to just even get the PDF, it's only $6 American, because I took a peek at it today. And then
we've partnered. Sorry to interrupt. So I get everything in the States fulfilled through our printer, which is Comic Impressions in Florida, who they print anyone that's read a Scout comic book. They do all of Scout's printing, along with a lot of other stuff. But for Damsel 1, I sort of trialed the fulfillment, and what it lets me do is, rather than charging an arm and a leg getting the stuff from the UK out to you guys, it ships direct from Florida. So that lets me, factor in some of that cost into the cost of the book, and keep the printing, the shipping cost down. And it should be closer to what you're used to backing from American Kickstarters. I definitely got a ton more American backers than anywhere else this time. So I'm guessing it's working. So don't be too worried about the shipping.
I think that's also because of America's dire need of having single issues. We are definitely single issue.
You're not wrong.
Trades are second.
Yeah, you're a different animal when it comes to comic reading. The American market is huge compared to us. Like the European and UK market is very different. I think, like you say, it's a very trade heavy, and very different to you guys. Not as much slabbing, CGCing, even though I love doing that stuff as well.
It has to be like that. Someone's just trying to get that American dream of living off of picking up comics, selling comics, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because I have noticed that because what is it? I've been talking to other people outside the U.S. and they just said you guys are crazy about single issues because it's just we like having like that the first printing of a first appearance or all that stuff,
and also the variants. Like I find that the American backers, like I'll do 5 times as many variant covers to the States as anywhere else. Like it's definitely a healthy market there.
Yeah, but again. He says he's a little fresh in the comic business, but obviously he knows what he's doing about having a Florida printing company to help us Americans get it. Just want to say thank you, Andrew, for coming on.
Thank you for having me on.
And where can the people find you also?
So you can go to, I have a website, which is clemsoncomics.com. I think that should be a lot easier for Americans to remember because you have that football university with the same name. Everywhere else in the world, they always add a P to my name. So yeah, clemsoncomics.com is my website. There's a bit about me. There's a photo, an email, and a few pictures. I don't do much with it. If you want to contact me, like you did, Twitter is the best place to do it. That's where I'm most active, and that's just at Andrew Clemson. Got in there nice and early. And yeah, I'm keeping it more about comics and less about politics this year. So it should be a much nicer place to be.
Well, hey, there you go. Again, thanks for coming on. And then, of course,
no worries.
With everything we do over here, obviously we say be good to each other, and we'll catch you next week. All right, and peace.